The opinions expressed by Peter Wexler, Robert Quittner, Kyle Plotkin, Michael Hart, Nicholas Hamner, and guests on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this network. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subjects covered. Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management LLC, aka BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Franklin Retirement Solutions are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents.
Welcome to another fantastic episode of Solving the Retirement Puzzle. As always, I am your host, Nick Hamner. I haven't changed yet. And with me, as they are every week, are Michael Hart and Kyle Plotkin. We have an exciting show today, so I'm going to get started by asking, where do you fall in your sibling order? Mike, where do you fall?
I am the oldest.
Kyle, what about you?
I am the oldest.
And I am the oldest. And interestingly enough, Mike, how many kids do you have?
One.
Kyle, how many kids do you have?
One.
I have one. So the test mules got smart and only had one kid. Because we were our parents' test mules. They didn't know what they were doing. They got into this way too early for the most part.
So you'll never be able to perfect it, is what
No.
you're saying.
No money, no experience, but here you are as the test dummy. But I bring this up because I was reading a thing the other day. A woman wrote into one of these advice column things. I think it was the New York Times, talking about how she, as the oldest child, was forced to choose a sensible college, take out small student loans, and do school that way. The middle child, her brother, did the exact same thing. Small, accessible school, nothing fancy, no Ivies. Small, accessible school, small loans, fund it yourself, go to college. Their youngest, the parents' youngest child, their younger sister, the parents were like, you can go to any school you want. We'll pay you, it's a full ride, we'll pay your housing. And she was upset at about how the parents picked and chose. And again, as the oldest child of numerous siblings, I'm sure we all had our squabbles at the house. It's even today, I will count how many M&Ms I have in my hand versus how many M&Ms somebody else has. Just like a thing. My daughter.
Sounds like a you problem.
Well, no, I mean it's the same thing. When you had you had a younger sister?
Yeah.
You guys didn't squabble over the last of anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Her balloon's bigger than my balloon.
That's why when there's a piece of cake, like you have to have one cut and then the other one choose.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Those kind of squabbles always. And you think as you get older, as you mature, they go away. They do not. To this day, my brothers keep tabs on each other about, well, who got mom and dad to pay for this? Who got mom and dad to pay for that? The biggest so far has been my middle brother having my parents pay for a washer dryer when the rest of us bought our appliances our own self. Like it's these weird kind of, it's petty to a degree, but it does matter. So and I bring this up, not like anybody's really paying for kids' colleges. Well, certainly we don't have to cover that for a while, the three of us. But for estate planning purposes, a lot of times parents will come in and either intentionally give a child less than they give the others, or we'll just say, I'm not splitting it. The kids can figure it out for themselves, which is just going to turn into a fight. And I read a thing, it was oddly enough a study published in a European journal that studied Americans over 70. And of those Americans over 70 who had an estate plan in place, more than 30% were either disinheriting a child or leaving one child less than others. Which is just, when that happens, what's going to happen is You're either going to have a family rift that they don't recover from, or you're going to have an estate plan battle where the only person who wins at the end of it is the lawyers who get to collect the attorney fees. It really makes no sense.
Yeah, so just I can speak from personal experience. When my grandmother passed, my grandmother had 6 kids. She had 3 boys and 3 girls.
Mm-hmm.
And when she passed, my grandfather had already passed. There was a life insurance policy where she had named one of my aunts as the sole beneficiary.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously to this day, we don't know if it was intentional
Mm-hmm.
or just done out of convenience. But as a result of one sibling getting more than the other 5 siblings, there's now a rift
Mm-hmm.
in the family, and we'll never know if that rift is justified, because we don't know what my grandmother's motivation was.
Right. Well, so that's why they say if you plan on disinheriting a child, which I personally strongly discourage unless there is a real justified, objective reason to disinherit this child. Either they are in prison or they will immediately spend that money on drugs or some other vice, in which point I would advise putting it into a trust to take care of them. Do not intentionally disinherit your children. If you do plan to disinherit a child, leave no question as to why. The big move you always see is leave a nominal sum in a will with an explanation. To my child Derek, who I am fairly, who stole the T-tops off my Firebird and sold them, I leave $10. Some kind of explanation as to why this exception is happening.
Right. Or I leave X amount of dollars to Joe, because over the course of my life I've lent him hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he never paid it back.
Well, I have no idea what the document looks like there in Alabama. It was handled by a local attorney. I don't know, and I guess I won't know until one day it pops up, but I know my parents have disinherited my youngest brother, largely due to my brother marrying an immigrant and my parents being strongly anti-immigrant and making it known in 2016 and beyond. And as a result of my brother having an issue with my parents chose to, rather than apologize or reach a reasonable conclusion, disinherit my brother. So that's going to be a whole fun ball of wax to deal with.
Yeah,
some
there's.
years ahead.
I've heard a lot of stories of parents not liking the spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And disinheriting because the spouse wasn't the person that they wanted it to be, or, it could be a million different things. There was some kind of incident that happened at a wedding. You name it. There's all kinds of stories out there of those types of things.
Right, and these kind of issues are becoming more and more common as it becomes more and more common for families to be estranged. I keep seeing articles. I don't actively go out and look for them, but I will see headlines from now, every now and again. And again, a lot of this has happened in the past 8 years, where it has become increasingly common for parents to become estranged from their adult children due to past traumas that one side doesn't want to acknowledge, or just a general sense of mental, a pursuit of mental health more than. I mean, politics plays a part in some of it. But
I was just going to ask,
more...
specifically, you'd said the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how much of it plays into politics.
I'm sure there's absolutely
sure.
some. I'm sure there's some where that definitely some where that doesn't play in, where there's other issues.
When you read the articles about it, like I said, I don't go out looking for them, but if I see a headline, just because of what's happened in my own family, I'm curious. And when you read it, they never will plant a thumbtack into a specific issue. They will discuss hypotheticals, because again, you're usually getting the information from one side with the other not speaking, and somewhere there's always 2 sides to a story, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth. and things are typically more subjective than they ever need to be when there's, like I said, so if you have an issue with a child, if you plan on disinheriting a child or leaving them less, or if you're handling a child's situation differently than another's, give an objective reason. As hard as it may be, as difficult a conversation as it may be, give an objective reason.
I mean,
Document it.
here's another scenario too, and I've seen this, where let's say one child struggled financially as an adult, and you bought them a house, or you paid for a $50,000 wedding that one kid had and the other didn't. Those could be valid reasons to adjust your the inheritance plan.
Right.
Typically I would think that people understand that, or the kids understand that, or if it's some kind of trust that things end up going into for that purpose. And those are certainly valid, but, it's not something that you want the kids to find out, when they're sitting around with the lawyer a week after you died.
But going back to the cake thing, if you've bought one child a house and left the other to fend for themselves, then you make up for that. You don't treat one child differently than another. So if you do plan to treat them equally when it comes to a will, if you've bought one child a house, left the others to fend for themselves, and you're still going to split the estate 50-50, then that deserves an explanation. It's important to realize your kids might be adults, but they're still your kids. They're still siblings. They're still going to squabble. So just like you had to break up fights when they were little, if you're not going to be around to break up the fight when it comes time to settle the estate, leave objective reasons. Can't really do that with beneficiary forms, but you could do that as part of a comprehensive estate plan where you have documents in place that explain these things. And if that's something you need, that's something you need to give us a call for. That's 215-657-9200. Or you can leave us an email at info@franklinrs.com. Kyle, I know you have a lot of data there. What's on those sheets of paper?
All right. So a lot of economic data has come out, certainly in the past couple of weeks, as recently as this morning. Obviously we're all waiting on the Federal Reserve to decide what they're going to do with interest rates. As of right now, everybody's expecting rates to be cut. How much is one of the questions that may have been answered with the inflation report that recently came out. Inflation was at 2.5% in August, after it had been at 2.9 in July. So the inflation is down a bit. It's below that 3% benchmark that they've kind of been waiting on. And so, there's some other numbers around that. The cost of housing is up more than 2.5%, and some other certain areas. But one of the things that I saw this morning is that there was a lot of uncertainty about whether the Fed was going to cut a quarter point or a half a point. It sounds now like most people are banking on that being a quarter point cut. The job market seems to be slowing down a little bit. Inflation is slowing down. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And we see the stock market reacted negatively today to that news, which you never know if good news is going to be good news or bad news, and as it goes. So it looks like as of at least today that is the case. So we'll see what happens when the Fed actually meets next week and makes an announcement. But certainly something to keep an eye on, something that everybody is watching. And obviously, higher interest rates benefit savers.
Yeah.
Generally benefit older people that have money in, say, CDs and bonds and et cetera. Whereas they're hurting a lot of younger people who are at the stage of life where they're trying to buy homes, get mortgages, take out loans or credit cards for various things.
I think this is relatable to a degree. I was doing some research yesterday. Do you know the highest year-over-year interest rate or rate of inflation we've ever had since it's been tracked?
Ever?
The annual rate of inflation, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
It's got to be late 70s, early 80s, I would think.
1979.
11%?
13.
Okay.
So as bad as we want to think it's been with the back-to-back years of 7 and 6.5 from 2021 and 22, 1979, which was when a lot of our clients entered the housing market, entered the job market. That time, 1979 at 13% was the highest annual rate of inflation we've ever seen.
Yep. So, and you know, comparing post-COVID, you know, the United States to the rest of the world, we've got significantly lower inflation than most of the rest of the world does right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's certainly been an issue. It's affected all of us, I want to say. But again, you got to look around and see what we're comparing it to. You know, if you just say inflation is high, well, compared to what?
Yeah.
So that's something that you always have to do. That's why whenever you see any kind of numbers in relation to the stock market, there's got to be a benchmark attached to it because you have to be able to compare it against something.
Yeah, and it's always curious. You know, people will always say, well, prices aren't so bad. You guys don't have anything to worry about. Your generation has it easy. When I was your age, you know, TV cost $800, and now they're $300. But when you look at the everyday cost of things, what eggs cost, what milk costs, what steaks cost, if you even go back, I found a price card of what concessions were at Connie Mack Stadium in 1954. A hot dog was 25 cents. A ham sandwich was 40 cents. If you adjust those just for inflation, that's still less than what they cost. Mm-hmm. So adjusted for inflation, that 25-cent hot dog would have been like $2.40. And
well,
now
I mean,
they're $6.
You look at the older generations. If you bought a house in the 70s, you know, it probably cost you like 3 nickels and a bag of golf balls. You know, and that same house now is $500,000. So not only are the interest rates high, the prices are through the roof. It's really, really difficult for young people to be able to purchase homes. I mean, I don't know.
My house is not even in a great rising neighborhood. My housing price is within 50% of what I paid for it, or 150% of what I paid for it. When you look at the skyrocketing cost of housing elsewhere, our neighborhood is down. But still, our house was bought new in 1954 for $10,000. You adjust that for inflation, that's roughly $130,000. It's valued, and they're selling for around $360,000.
Yep.
You can't even build my house again. If it burned to the ground tomorrow, and you know, if my house burned to the ground tomorrow, and we had to rebuild it, we could not do it for what the price would be if it was solely adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, there are just some things where the demand is completely inelastic to the price. So the home prices, if people want to buy a house, you know, they're gonna pay whatever they need to. College, you know, people are gonna pay whatever they need to. Insulin, I mean, we've seen these things where
Healthcare.
Yeah, you can raise the price whatever you want, and people are gonna mostly find a way to pay for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, just if you look at car prices, a half-ton pickup in 1954. I'm doing this because I related everything to 1954, just in my calculations. So a brand new half-ton pickup in 1954, just a basic Chevy pickup, with a couple of options, $1,500. You adjust that for inflation, that's a little over $17,000. If you took $17,000 into a car dealership today, the only thing you could buy is the sand they would tell you to pound.
Yeah,
The cheapest pickup truck today
you
is
can barely
$37,000.
you can barely get a used anything for that price these days.
Now I think you know I know I've talked about it before, but the average car payment now is $750, and that's over 84 months.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That was a mortgage payment not all that long ago.
No. Our mortgage payment, we bought our house in 2007, our mortgage payment is $1,200. And that includes property insurance and tax.
Yep.
And we live in a high-tax district.
Yeah. Now, if you were to buy that same house today with the increase in value plus the interest rates, I mean, I don't know. You'd probably be looking at. You say how much?
About 21 just in house payment alone.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, there was an interesting article that, I mean, this is going back a while now, but and obviously I live in New Jersey, so that the numbers are going to vary a little bit. But to be comfortable in New Jersey, the income needed was about $250,000
For a family of 4?
I didn't say how big the family was. I assumed it was a married couple with probably 2 kids. But yeah, and I mean, I've run the numbers as far as, because I'm always telling people when they ask, how much should I be trying to save, and I always try to lean towards that 20% number. And when you look at how much everything costs and then how much you need to make to be able to just lop off 20%, that 250,000 number is pretty close. Maybe a little on the high side, but it's not far from what you actually need to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So it's interesting here because we're talking about the inflation. We're talking about it coming under, that interest rates may fall, and we're talking about interest rates not really in terms of saving. We as financial advisors, we're used to seeing these interest rates as a selling point of certain savings devices,
Which are coming down quickly, by the way.
Yes. So treasuries were a real popular safe alternative for the past 18 months. Not so much anymore, but really,
I mean, in the past couple of weeks, if you just, a 3-month treasury has dropped from, they were 5.2, 5.3. As of today, I looked, they're closer to 4.7.
Yeah. But we just sat here and had a 10-minute conversation like the old men that we seem to be about how prices are different than they used to be. But that's really important when you're planning for an income plan as you retire, to make sure you have enough money, because so many people have these ideas. It's not so much an income plan as it is a budget, and a bad budget at that, because the best thing a budget's ever going to do is make a fun noise when you blow right past it. But an income plan, especially the ones we create that are inflation adjusted income plans, account for these things. So it might cost you $10,000 today if you have an emergency expense on your house to replace your air conditioner. But 10 years from now, when that air conditioner burns out again and you have to replace it again, it's going to be $15,000, $16,000. We factor these things in so that you're never left hanging, so that you're not struggling 10 years from now, 15 years from now, providing you don't pick up a new vice or a gambling addiction. You'll have that money there. You have a plan in place that accounts for these price increases, that accounts for how life is going to proceed, that makes sure you're still okay. And I know you had more stuff to talk about, but it's a really good point to cut off because we're kind of pressed for time. But also, it was a really good point to make. So, again, if you don't have inflation adjustments built into your income plan, if you don't have an income plan at all, that's one of the cornerstones of a solid retirement plan these days. So we need to get on top of that. Give us a call, 215-657-9200. Shoot us an email at info@franklinrs.com. And with that lovely segue underway, Mike, you're the anchor leg this week. What do we have?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it brief, but there's a company out there called Dalbar, and what they do is they survey...
Dalbar?
Yeah.
Like DOWBAR?
DAL.
Yeah.
DALBAR?
Yep.
Yeah. And what they do is they survey different groups of investors, and they track performance. And so they did a 30-year study on the typical investor, your average retail investor, versus professional money managers.
Yes. So guys doing it themselves versus people that have an expert with them.
Right, exactly. And so what they found from data from January of 1994 up till the end of 2023 is that the average retail investor in equities averaged just over 8% per year.
Okay.
Which sounds pretty good, right?
Is that the Dave Ramsey approved year-over-year number?
It is not even close.
What does he assume? 10%?
12%. Yeah. Well, that's for another episode. We
don't really address cults on this show.
We'll get into that.
It's just totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
But then if you look at professionals, on average, averaged 10.15%, so just over 10%. So that's a 2% difference, and you might be thinking to yourself, 2%, not a big deal. But if we look at those same numbers with a hypothetical investment of $100,000 in 1994, at 8%, your $100,000 would have grown to just over $1 million.
Okay.
right? Not bad.
No,
Right?
but
But
a million doesn't go that far anymore.
that extra 2%, had it been invested in just a regular S&P 500 index fund, earning just over 10% for the 30 years, would be just over 1.8 million.
So
Right.
that's
So we're essentially talking about
almost double.
almost double, an $800,000 difference that not working with a professional can cause yourselves. And obviously, there's a number of reasons for that. You have investors who, when the market goes down, they panic and they sell. When they see a particular stock that looks like it's on fire, like Nvidia, they don't want to miss out, so they jump in and they have
Jump in
FOMO.
late, they leave early.
And then,
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, when you're market timing, you have to be right twice. You have to know when to get in, but you also have to know when is the perfect time to get out. So again, just another example, to keep it brief of, working with a professional and having someone by your side who's going to help you navigate, those emotional reactions and those fears and the fear of missing out on the next hot stock. Is it worth an extra $800,000 to be working with a professional? I think so.
Well, it kind of, the thing you mentioned earlier about, or a few minutes ago, about the index fund and how the index fund would perform versus the professional manager versus the individual investor. It reminds me of there was an old Will Rogers quote, and it kind of disproves that. The quote is, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Well, maybe in investing, that isn't necessarily the best advice.
That's a very, very timely quote. You're getting really good at pulling these quotes out of nowhere.
Did you like that?
It was
That
decent.
was a good one.
For a Will Rogers quote, that was pretty decent.
Well,
Better than a Will
as
Smith.
long as we're staying relevant.
Better than a Will Smith quote.
I
Or a
could-
Mr. Rogers quote.
I could give you either one.
I might write that quote down and just put it in my office and just
Yeah.
keep it around so I can read it.
Well, welcome to Miami.
But I think we've got this was a really good show. Despite starting off a little rough, I got to say, between giving your kids a reason if you're going to treat them differently with your finances, keeping interest rates in mind with everything and hoping for the best and why interest rates are important, and then just understanding the value of a professional. On all three of these, having a professional opinion would really make a difference in the lives of your kids, in your retirement planning going forward, and just in the overall performance you could expect. Having a professional makes a difference. And so with that in mind, if you need to talk to a professional, that's what we are. So you want to give us a call, 215-657-9200. Give us a shout via email at info@franklinrs.com. Anything we talked about today, any questions you might have, just let us know. That's what we're here to do. And until next week, I hope you have a good week. We'll see you around.